Transform your startup journey with the Energy Tech Nexus. Connect with fellow founders, access critical resources, and be part of a community shaping the future of energy and carbon tech. Your path to building a Thunder Lizard starts here. Learn more at energytechnexus.com.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'm really excited not only to have a really special guest, but also to have a guest host with me. Many of you may know him if you've been around in Houston, Jan Odegaard, who many of us know him as the former managing director of the ION, really a pioneer with building the innovation ecosystem here in Houston, has been a professor at Rice for many, many years of computer science. So welcome, Jan.
Thank you. And delighted to be here and looking forward to a good conversation this morning. And yes, this is my first time here on the podcast and maybe not the last one. So we'll see.
We'll see how it goes.
We'll see how it goes. I mean, they may keep me on here. So as Nada said, I spent most of my career in academia, sort of on the other side of the fence. And when the ION investment by Rice University came along, I said that is something I want to sink my teeth into because I really saw the gap between sort of what we were doing, great things on campuses around Texas, and where did that go and not go in most cases. So that was really the investment. And also was the retention of talent was an important part for me, seeing that how we educate people in Houston and keep the talent here. And I think we'll probably get into some talent conversations today. We'll get into some technology, the roles of universities, the role of ecosystems. So really looking forward to the conversation. And I'm hoping also we get to chat a little bit about capital and the capital market. So.
Yeah, awesome. So let me welcome Mush Khan, who is the CEO of Alchemy Industrial. He came on not too long ago on this podcast. And so I would encourage our listeners to go back and listen to that one too, about 6 months ago. But we really wanted to bring you on again today because the context of like what we're operating in and what you're doing has really changed. And we thought it would be great to get your thoughts on what's going on kind of geopolitically and how it's impacting startups, how it's impacting industrial manufacturing, and just generally the mental health of people. No, but let's start off with just a brief intro, Mush, on what are you doing? What is Alchemy Industrial? And a little bit about your background, like how you got into what you're doing today.
Great. Well, Nada, Jan, thanks for having me here. It's always fun to be with the podcast and always great to have good conversations. You know what? On one lead-off note, it's so great to me that Houston is having these conversations. I think that ideas are the bedrock of everything. And so one of the wonderful things about Houston is that I think all the best ideas are happening here. With respect to other parts of the country and the world, this is the place to be. So just one quick advert for Houston. So my very brief background, I'm an engineer by degree. So I spent my whole career in the energy industry, everything from manufacturing to industrial distribution, even software development, different kinds of products, safety products, hardcore industrial products, et cetera. So this is literally the only thing I know. If you asked me to sell women's shoes, that would be a massive failure. But when it comes to industrial stuff, this is my life. And I love it. I truly do love it. And another reason to be here in Houston. So Alchemy Industrial, we formed Alchemy a few years ago with sort of this concept about reshoring. And it was actually pre-COVID that we launched Alchemy. And some of this was informed by some prior jobs that I had, one in particular as the CEO of a PE-backed company that had its supply chain in China. So I spent a little bit of time in China. Incredible experience, incredible people. I don't think you can find harder working people than there, with the possible exception of Houston. But it's a great community to build things. But it also showed some really important trends that were happening. One of the things that I noticed right away, and this goes into the leading of what caused Alchemy to be born, that I began to see the labor rates increasing every time I was there. Manufacturing direct labor rates in particular, which is good. I think that's very good for China. But you could see this unfolding of China no longer being the low labor rate country. in the early days. And so this was back in 2014, 2015, something like that. And so, and now fast forward to today, China's direct manufacturing labor rate is actually higher than higher than Mexico. Excuse me. China is higher than Mexico, which is kind of begins to set global dynamics and much higher than India, which I think we're seeing unfold. So this idea of reshoring, it wasn't like a bolt of lightning inspiration. It was more a gradual unfolding of an idea. So me and my co-founder, John Weinzierl, decided to form Alchemy Industrial, sort of driven with this idea in mind. So as we went deeper, we began to think about, okay, what's going to be most important to build here in the United States? A lot of different things that we looked at, that we did also. But finally, we settled on things related to power. So our view was that if America was going to reshore and reindustrialize, if we were going to electrify, which we are, every modern economy tends to electrify more and more over time, just based on physics alone. That's what tends to happen. We thought, okay, we don't have enough power infrastructure in the United States to meet this kind of demand, nowhere near it. And this was before data centers. I didn't, no idea about data centers before then, and so we thought, okay, we need to be in the power game. And then we thought about what's the thing that was sort of most important from a first principle standpoint. So we settled on battery energy storage, which I think is a fundamental physical and economic device that has to exist in the marketplace. Batteries solve a tremendous number of problems. Put aside IRA, put aside sustainability, put aside all that stuff, but just on pure economics, you got to store energy in a network, just like a cache stores data in a computer network. Storage is vital to everything that we do. I bought this, or you bought this, and this was delivered in a package. This is a form of inventory. So without storage, things don't work. So we're very focused on battery energy storage and all the control systems that come with it. We're still early. I feel like we'll be early for the next 10 years, but early stage as a company. But we do have now customers that are producing revenue. So, we build stuff and they send us money in exchange, which is great. And we have opportunities that are scalable. And so, and then, this whole situation with tariffs has really accelerated what we're doing, which I know we'll get into. But it's an amazing time for Alchemy. It's not easy. I was joking with someone the other day that Alchemy is about 4 years old. And I said, it's kind of like a 4-year-old human. You can never take your eyes off it, and occasionally it embarrasses you and runs into the street, and so that's the life of, I think, an early stage company. And that's what we are. But, I couldn't dream of building anything else or dream of anywhere else that I would build this kind of a company than in Houston. This is the place to be, in my view.
Interesting.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. And I think especially like listening to you talk about like how you had this vision of reshoring pre-COVID, because people start thinking about it during COVID when the supply chain was massively interrupted. And you're like, we can't be dependent on trade because something like this could happen, a pandemic, a war, some other catastrophe, and suddenly the supply chain is cut off. And some of the very essential things, we need to have them manufactured in America. And then serendipitously, like COVID happened, and now we have a new administration that's really has this as a strong focus, and suddenly everyone is talking about reshoring. So talk to us a little bit about, let's get into it a little bit. What is the right way to bring manufacturing back to
Oh my
the US?
gosh. First of all, I think it's a very difficult thing to do. And there's a number of reasons why it's difficult. I think, well, let's go back to this bottle of water, seemingly simple. But in reality, it's a very complex supply chain that has delivered this to us. There's different kinds of plastic, there's paper on it, there's water in it. A truck had to bring it to us. Someone had to figure out how to invoice it, commercialize it, all that stuff. It's complicated. This simple bottle of water. So imagine having to rebuild these complex supply chains around very complicated products like batteries, semiconductors, power equipment, medicine. this is not an easy thing to do. I think it is an absolutely necessary thing to do. That being said, I think our expectations of the country we should be thinking in a decade type of a time frame. Would it be great if we could wave a magic wand and all of a sudden we have supply chains for all the critical things here overnight? Absolutely. I don't own that magic wand. If I did, we'd all be on an island somewhere, sipping umbrella drinks. But I think we've got to be patient and work this. I think we also have to recognize that, who cares where hoodies are made? But I care where transformers are made. Who cares where shoes are made? But I care where medicines are made. And so I think as a community, as a country, we've got to say there's probably half a dozen categories of products that we just have to figure out how to do. Because as you pointed out, Nadia, with COVID, it showed us how fragile our supply chains are. And this is not an anti-China position, but we shouldn't allow, as a country like the United States, we shouldn't allow ourselves to be this exposed on absolutely critical things. And frankly, we don't need to be. We have so many resources here to leverage. If we have the patience and the hard work, capital is going to take a lot of capital, like in T's type of capital, trillions. I think it's a $20 to $30 trillion investment over the next 2 decades to reindustrialize America. It's not clear to me where that capital is going to come from yet. But I think it'll be fun building it. Anyone who wants to rebuild this part of America, I think the next 20 to 30 years is going to be really hard, really frustrating, and really fun.
So that's interesting. So where do you see kind of there's also an order of thing and a sequence of things that needs to happen for that reshoring to happen. And there is, the workforce and the talent and the skills. We claim to have a lot, and as you said, we have a lot of really good manufacturing people here, but are we ready to take on the additional cost, nevertheless, that it is here compared to it is in Asia to manufacture?
Oh, goodness.
What are the minerals, and so take that bottle, do we have all the skills of the entire supply chain to control that, where we're not held hostage by, let's say, the minerals, the raw materials that we need?
No, we're not. We're not ready at all. And I don't think it's possible to do it in an orderly way. I think it's going to be very chaotic for the next 3, 4, 5 years. And in my experience, and even building a company is this way, and you guys have built businesses and been around businesses that have built. Businesses are not really built intentionally. They emerge, really. There's this kind of primordial soup of bullshit. Then all of a sudden, miraculously, something comes out of it that is organized. And so I think that's the same thing that's going to happen. It's going to take, hundreds, thousands of entrepreneurs that are doing their thing. Would it be great if they could coordinate? Yeah, absolutely. But heck, me and my 2 kids can't even decide where to go to dinner at the same restaurant. Coordination is very difficult. But I do think this sort of goes back to how we started off, the importance of having conversations and ideas. Hopefully someone is listening and they're like, oh, wait, I'm doing this thing and Mush is doing this thing, Alchemy's doing this thing. Maybe we should get together. So I think it's going to be uncoordinated, chaotic, and incredible.
It reminds me of, Tim Cook said this quote that's been going around that, we don't go to China, because that's what we see, Apple iPhones are made in China. We don't go to China because it's the cheapest. If we had to go somewhere cheaper, we would go to, Vietnam or somewhere else.
Yeah.
But we go there because of the skill.
Yes.
Because they have trained armies and armies of people to build these things, and have that kind of skill. And back to what you said earlier about, you said, we need to think more long term. And I think the way China thinks, it's not even decades. They think 50 years ahead, right? And we don't have that thinking. We think 5 years, and then there's an administration change, and then we change our policies and laws again, and then it's 5 more years.
Yeah, that's problematic. And I don't know, I don't know what the solution to that is, besides enough leaders all over the place to have a through line, through that political turnover, which is obviously inevitable. And in reality, really, an administration has 2 years to try to get things done, because then it goes into, midterm cycles and re-election for the presidency and all this other stuff. I think that's the sort of the beautiful mess that America is. I will say there is, and I would sort of think about the through line this way, that, and this is still very true of America in my view. And I'm not from the US, I'm a happy citizen now, naturalized, and have been for a number of years. But I can say this as sort of an observer of America, in addition to being an American, is that I think that America has this really interesting characteristic. And sorry for swearing, but I will. There's something unique about America that allows us, compels us to say "fuck off" to authority. And authority changes, okay, but I think authority really is the old way of doing things. And we have enough people in the country who are willing to say "fuck off" to authority that drives this forward outside of political wins, outside of trends, outside of whatever. I mean, let's look at the three of us. We've challenged the status quo in different areas. That's very uniquely American. I've worked in 20 plus countries around the world. I haven't found that characteristic anywhere else.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Kind of, and you being a professor, like thought leadership and challenging the status quo. Talk to us about how you.
But so that's an interesting point, and I agree with you. But the question is, do we have the patience? Yeah. Because it requires, just a project that, I mean, you can't build an innovation sort of ecosystem, overnight. It is a long play, and are we willing to be patient to drive in that direction? And what do you see there? Because it's going to take time to get the talent, it's going to take time to get the minerals, it's going to take time to get it right, and there will be some mistakes along the way, and that's part of the business. Talk to me about sort of do we have the patience to actually do this?
I don't know. I mean, I certainly hope we do. I hope we do. I know it's required. It's a bit of a paradox. I think we not only have to have patience, but we also have to have a sense of urgency. I think the question is, okay, sense of urgency to do what? So it's okay to say it's a 10-year journey as long as we have some idea of the destination in mind, some strategic intent that emerges from the sort of this national conversation. So we probably don't have the patience, and in a way, I'm glad we don't, because that forces us to act. But I think also Americans also intuitively understand that big things, great things take time to build. Now, I would also say that we've been also locked down in a regulatory framework that is unnecessary, not in terms of like zero regulations, but there are things that take too long. So if I wanted to build a new power plant today, it takes way too long. And we think about this all the time. Inside the company, and we're using AI actively inside our business, but I'll give you one example of what I'm trying to communicate. For us to deliver a proposal, realistically takes about half an hour of actual human minutes of work. But how long does it take in like the time in from a time scale? It might take a week or 2 or 3. Now AI is disrupting all of that, but in reality, I think we have to think as a country. Before we even think about, things that we don't want to do, we can think about, okay, why are we waiting? What's the latency in the system? If something is sitting on someone's desk for a week, is it adding value by sitting there on someone's desk? So to me, that's sort of the counter to, or not the counter, but the complement to being patient. We should be patient, but we shouldn't waste time at the same time.
No. I mean, I think it's critically important that the hustle needs to continue.
Yes.
That needs to go there. But as a larger society, individuals need to be in a hurry.
Yes.
I think as a society, to reshoring that capability is going to take time, and there's going to be missteps and there's going to be successes. And maybe many of the successes will be not in what you started out doing. It is going to be the pivot along the road.
Yeah.
And so that is a key thing. And I'm glad you brought up sort of the building sort of an energy. I mean, nuclear is increasingly and we're very hesitant of going there, and the permitting and all of that, and not in my backyard kind of thing. And so we need to get also the larger population on board with many of the important moves we need to make. So how do you see that?
Yeah, and I see also like, you said things take long, and it's like permitting, and that's from really the government side, right? Like, why does EPA and like the national Nuclear Foundation and whoever's approving the permits, why are they taking 3 years to approve it? Like, I know there are studies that need to be done, but can it not be done in 1 year?
I think, that's the right question to ask. Absolutely. I think that's the only way to sort out the necessary wait time versus the unnecessary wait time.
Exactly. That's what it is, right? Yeah.
I think we do have to have a national conversation about these kinds of things. I mean, it requires tremendous leadership everywhere from within a town to nationally. We've got to have incredible leadership. China, and I'm not advocating we should be like China. I don't think we should be. China's sort of national champion philosophy of picking industries that they want to win in. It is very effective. However, it may be wrong, and then they've committed trillions of dollars to an investment that should have pivoted. So that's sort of the negative of this national champion. We must win in this thing. It may end up being more right than wrong, but that story is yet to be told. But I think America's approach has to be strong leadership through all corners and all quarters. And I actually think, it's from a human capital standpoint, the one of the best ways to differentiate oneself today is by exhibiting those leadership capabilities. You don't have to go build a power plant. You could do whatever. It can be a smaller project, but there's the opportunity to lead is wide open, I think.
Yeah.
So and one thing, just kind of, I wonder if you've thought about this, because at the onset of the World War II, the U.S. was staying out, and then they got involved, and they really built a machine of manufacturing. How was that easier, and how did they do it? And are there parallels we could draw?
Yeah, it's an really interesting question. War is also obviously a big disastrous, horrible catalytic events, and Bretton Woods was the outcome of World War II, post World War II, that sort of shaped a world economic order that's lasted for 3/4 of a century. I think there are parallels now, and this is what led to my thinking about reshoring pre-COVID and tariffs and pre all this other stuff. I felt like there was almost a strain in that world order. It just didn't feel like it made a lot of sense to me. Honestly, I didn't have a lot of data. It was more an intuition, that didn't make sense. The math I did was, oh my God, this is an incredible country, the US, all these resources, natural resources. We're blessed with tremendous geography. I was talking to my business partner the other day about the inland waterways in the United States, which are natural artifacts, but allow us to ship things really inexpensively. Well, we didn't build that, but it's here. We've got agriculture, we've got natural resources. My view was we really should be doing more stuff here. So I think that it is a time now. I would say things like, the current discussions about tariffs, other geopolitical events. I believe that, and I don't know how else to put this, Jan, but it's sort of a natural next step from an order that kept the world fairly stable for 75 years. So I think it's happening. There's, thank goodness, no world war. God forbid.
Yep.
That would be disaster. But I do think that the chips are being moved around, and so I view this as not the calm before the storm. I think we're in the storm now.
We're in the eye,
but it's a slow motion storm.
And I mean, some kind of rupture needs to happen, right? But I think, I was thinking back to like what you were saying. Yes, things are manufactured in China, but they're designed here. And what you said about we're an innovative country, we're a country of entrepreneurs, like since World War II, like nowhere else. The innovations have mostly been driven by the U.S., and then everyone has followed and kind of built on top of that. And it reminds me of like there was a survey of students all over the world globally, and looking at like in Asia, in China, people were very good in science and math, and then they said Americans, what they rate very highly on is confidence, right? Like,
that's true.
Like their confidence.
Sometimes unfounded, but yeah, definitely
but
true.
that confidence gives us the ability to take risks,
Yes.
right? And then you take risks, and you're innovative, and you're
Yeah,
like, no,
fuck off to authority.
Yeah,
that's
fuck
my
off
point.
to authority. And so, and that's important. But going back to talking about like tariffs, because there's a way of like bringing back manufacturing in terms of the Biden administration wanted to do the same, and they were working. We had the infrastructure bill.
Sure.
And the IRA, that's a lot of money going into building local infrastructure and creating those jobs. And I hope in some fashion that will be continued. And then there's tariffs. So I was listening on the radio this morning. They were saying, well, tariffs should help local wine from California to be sold more. But then they were interviewing this small business owner who produces this wine. And he's like, yeah, but my corks come from Spain and Portugal. And my barrels where I store this wine come from France, because that oak wood is like the best wood for that wine. And like I'm like so even though my wine is made here, but it's a complicated process. And everything I do to make that wine is dependent on trade.
Yeah, I think you have, and you're right. Interestingly, I think we've had two administrations, well, three. So let's say Trump 1, Biden, and Trump 2. All three administrations, and I would even argue the Obama administration began to become not isolationist, but withdrawing a little bit from the world. And so, we had come out of the Iraq War, et cetera. So I think the country was like, well, what are we doing? And so I think with starting with Obama and maybe even the 2008 financial crisis, I would say that was the beginning point of Americans beginning to rethink what this economic system needs to look like. So Trump won, obviously, I would say very big on rhetoric, not as much action, but the rhetoric definitely was make shit here. Then Biden came in, and as you correctly pointed out, Nada, he was much more incentive based. So Inflation Reduction Act, Infrastructure Bill, CHIPS Act, et cetera. So more carrot oriented. And then Trump is here heavy stick oriented. I don't know what the right approach is, but the through line is make shit here.
Make shit here.
Yeah. Now tariffs, the way that we're doing it now is extremely chaotic. And very hard for businesses to accommodate the changes. Frankly, because we don't really know where it's headed. I think, and maybe that's part of the plan. I don't know.
Yeah, it's uncertainty that's
there's
more
a lot of
dangerous.
uncertainty. Yeah. And so it's very hard to plan what's going to happen. But again, I think we as entrepreneurs and business leaders should be looking at that through line, which is make shit here. And so I think, taking that wine person, probably not an easy solution for that person, and
so even for businesses who are building things here, like just those tariffs impact them too.
100%, right? Yeah, there's no doubt.
I mean, just as a follow-on to that wine story, because there's been a few stories about it. The other thing that the American wine producers said, well, we're going to hurt us because the distribution network will be gone because it won't be big enough for just us. So the cost of distributing our wines will skyrocket, was even for the distribution side.
Yeah.
So there's sort of cascading things that we're not looking at.
Yeah.
And so it is one interesting challenges. I want to sort of pivot a little bit here. And I wonder, so, you depend on talent. We're hollowing out our educational system, it seems like, and we're sort of, again, shocking that one. So what's your thoughts about sort of the pipeline of talent that you have access to? And also, at the end of that, maybe talk to us about how do you find it to find talent here in Houston for your business?
Well, that's a great question, Jan. I think this is why I think it's a 10 to 20 year journey. We have to rebuild a talent pipeline from the beginning.
Yeah.
I wish there was an easy solution to this one. There isn't. If there was, I'd be in that business doing that. Still might in some ways, but so I think again, it's going to take time. I think also we've got to really think about sort of the compensation strategies for the people that work in manufacturing. So back in the day, it was a very stable sort of a job. You could count on it, even if you worked hourly, certain number of hours or above. You had a pension, et cetera. Okay, so we've moved very far away from that. So almost every manufacturing employee in the US now is a contract employee by another name. In other words, they're good until the end of the next pay period. That's it. So in your mind as a person, if you have a family, that creates tremendous stress. So I think one thing we have to think about is how do we, as private employees, how do we rethink this idea of what employment should be? And maybe you can't do this with everybody, but could you take, let's say, 60 to 70% of your team and say, I'm investing a ton of money in them in training, and I'm going to rethink my comp and my commitment to those employees. So I think we've got to think about that. I also think in terms of young people, we 50 years ago, let's say, maybe longer, we had people that were working in agriculture. So they came off, mom and dad's farm, fixing a tractor. So they were mechanical skills ready. Well, not true today at all. Now, there are other skills that are important, obviously, but we've got to think about how do we see skills development in a different way. And then I think if you look at the employment statistics, there's millions of employees that have given up on working for probably a number of really good reasons. Most of which is probably really shitty work out there. And so there's maybe 7 or 8 million employees, and not all of them are going to go into manufacturing. But how do we get to them? How do we think about things like in manufacturing? It's heavily male oriented.
Right.
How do we make the jobs attractive to female employees too?
So I do want to one quick follow on, because you brought up something interesting and that made me think about, we have been so focused that sort of success in the US is all about getting to college and getting a bachelor's and then maybe going postgraduate. Germany and a lot of Europe have this technical program, which actually is much more profession oriented towards the kind of skills we need. Is that something we need to, there has been sort of dabbles at the edges of wanting to do that. We don't have a robust program that here. Is that something that you think could be an interesting?
I think that's fundamental. I think Germany's program, if we could cut and paste that here, first of all, I think a lot of Americans would really love it. And it is professional. You're not considered sort of a second-class employee. You're a professional employee.
Exactly.
Who cares, what your Department of Labor job classification is? I think those kinds of things are important. But I also think that there's and by the way, this whole area of talent, there's like 100 businesses that we could build to solve these problems and become very wealthy doing it. But one of them, I think, is this idea of what is a credential. So as an employer today, we've said, because you went to school at ABC school, so I'm a mechanical engineering graduate from LSU. And so somebody saw that on my resume and said, oh, I've outsourced my decision making because LSU said that this guy is good. Is good. Okay. Or, in my case,
it's trained.
Average. And so, So, but I think there's this idea of credentialing around how can we, so let's say you got a machinist or a truck driver or whatever, how do we validate that person? And how can we make that credential owned by that individual? That credential has to be carried by that person. And I think this is where things like AI and other technologies can be really, really interesting to say, look, here, my resume, it's right here, and it's verified, it's based on data, and who cares where I went to school? I've done this for 15 years. So let's say I went to school and I graduated with a history major, but then I've done financial analysis for 15 years. Well, who cares where you went to school if you can show that you're legit and that. So
is that part of your next sort of compensation package, where investing in your employee, 1, through training and certifications and credentials, and 2, bringing back some version of a pension? Because where you sort of couple them, where you get some stickiness, because now 3 years, that's a long time to stay with a company.
Well, you have to.
Exactly.
You have to. I don't think you're going to get people without rethinking this kind of stuff. So I would say in the sort of the hierarchy of needs as an employee, we've all been employees. We all are employees in different ways. But one of the hierarchies of needs is that, are you working for a company that you believe in, and whatever that means to you, which I think is largely dependent on the person you're directly reporting to. If that experience is bad, company is bad. Experience is good, company is good. But then also, are you paid fairly? I think when people think about fair pay, they think my buddy doing a similar job in another company is making about as much as I am. I think that equals fair.
Yeah.
If you haven't crossed that, none of the other juicy stuff will land on an employee. Yeah. And then you're opened up to all kinds of other things like training and development and other kinds of benefits.
Mm-hmm.
Are you ready to lead the decarbonization charge? Energy Tech Nexus is your platform for growth, offering unique resources and expertise for energy and carbon tech founders. Join us at energytechnexus.com and start building your Thunder Lizard.
I think that's, super interesting. And it reminds me of how it's a system, right? Yeah. And we can't fix one thing because everything is going to have an impact. So if you look at, okay, why do we live in a society where a 4-year degree is valued more than a 2-year degree? It could be like a technical degree, right? And a lot of it is because the universities really want everyone to go there. It's like a business, right?
It's a business model.
It's more like run like a business. You want everyone to get, and that's how we've kind of promoted our culture. It's like, get that 4-year degree, pay a lot of money to get that 4-year degree, and then go into debt, and like you have to change the whole system. And then I was thinking, based on what you were saying is like, our world is changing, right? What we haven't touched yet that we, I want us to go into is like AI and automation. Since World War II or like since the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, which was kind of the peak of the industrial era, here in the US, we've lost maybe 10 million jobs to reshoring, but I would think majority of them is also because of automation. So if
that's probably true, yeah.
If you go to a Tesla factory, today, it's all automated. It's more robots than people. And the people working there are basically managing the robots, right? Like they're computer engineers and scientists. So like, how do we, because the topic is also about jobs, like how do you make these people who are unhappy right now? Why we have the administration that we have today is because I think in my mind, it's a lot because of inequality. Because in the 1960s, if you were a mechanic or if you were working in an auto industry, you were making not so far away from what the doctor or the lawyer was making.
Very
like
true.
It
was a real, you could raise a family.
Yeah, the income gap wasn't that bad.
Yeah,
but what's happened is now doctors are becoming richer and richer.
Sure.
Businesses are getting more and more money. Like you're seeing, the likes of Musk, like people, flying jets and like just a lot more billionaires. But then there are others who are still, white collar workers, blue collar workers, still stuck at, 50K, 60K. So there's like this big gap.
That's so true. Yeah, it is. I think there is this a very big and important problem to solve, which is one of the reasons why I love manufacturing because, you can make decent money even at sort of in your early days in manufacturing, and
like how do we push for that where we are compensating people fairly, we are taking care of pensions, because I feel like in some way that drive has kind of gone away, and now we're not thinking about, we have become more efficient because we have AI, because we have technology. Like the 8 hours I put in today are probably 3 hours that I used to
true.
Or like, I have to put in 3 hours now to do the 8-hour work that I used to do 20 years ago. But I'm not being compensated for that.
No.
And I'm not being told that, okay, now I can work less and have a better quality of life. Instead, I'm like, no, you got to work more.
Well, so
how do we rethink, the way that we work? Because we still are thinking 50, 100 years ago that we should work in the same way. But if we want to make sure more people have jobs, more people have good quality of lives, let's also innovate in the way that we think a workday should be for everybody.
We have to, I think, in order to win this. And you're so right.
Yeah.
You're so right. I think that work should be meaningful on balance. Not every day is meaningful. But, some days, like somebody has to buy their toilet paper. That's not meaningful work for anybody. But, but for the most part, most of our days should be meaningful work, which is not true today, unfortunately, for many of us. And I kind of have this snide comment that I use sometimes, the spreadsheet guild. And the spreadsheet guild are people that, look at things through, some Excel spreadsheet where they say, oh, we should be less expensive, this and that. Okay, and some of that's part of it, but there's a bigger opportunity to say, how can we be more innovative? How can we create things? One of the interesting thought exercises to do that I'm doing right now, and I'm going to write something on this once I've coalesced, is if you take out money, what is the wealth of a country? What are the things that create wealth? Or what really is wealth? We've conflated money with wealth. But as you pointed out, there's a lot more to wealth, than other things, than just money. And there's 5 things. I won't go into detail, but one of them is the natural health of a country, the ecosystem, trees, lakes, oceans, etc. How clean are they, etc. The air. Number 2 is the physical and mental and emotional health of a person, its citizens. Number 3 is the sense of community, society. How healthy is that? Do you feel like you belong somewhere? Number 4 is the robustness of the knowledge ecosystem. How easily do ideas move? How ideas get, how easily are they propagated? Are they rewarded, et cetera? And then finally, sort of the physical systems, roads and bridges and, and houses and things like that. In my mind, we've got to think about wealth in a different way, because imagine a place, this mythical place, where everything was clean, like clean as we want to define it, where people were generally healthy and they could get healthy if they weren't healthy, and they felt good about the world they lived in, if they felt connected to their communities, however they define it, if they could be creative in their own ways and those ideas were rewarded. And then finally, they lived in good homes and the roads weren't shit and everything else. I mean, wouldn't we want to live in a society that looked like that?
It's not mythical, actually.
Yeah, no. And
Jan is from Norway, and he'll tell you.
I love Norway.
Well, but it's interesting. I love what you're saying. I love the 5 points. And I think that what we need to figure out is how can people live in comfort and take advantage of those benefits?
Yes,
and I think that, the erosion of the middle class is what allows people to figure that I can't even participate if it was an opportunity.
That's so true. Yeah.
And that is sort of the concentration of wealth on one end of the scale to the cost of the rest of it really makes it hard to even appreciate that.
Yeah, I think and politically I'm a libertarian, but also I think there's also certain sort of societal realities that we have to deal with. One of the important ones is that if there's a big enough portion of our society that doesn't feel like it can participate in the game, they'll flip the board game over.
Yeah.
This is not my idea. This is history, and so I would argue that
this is the French Revolution.
Yeah, and I would argue, like in the U.S., we're having versions of that happening. So I think we should pay attention to those signals. I think again, why I'm so passionate about manufacturing is that it is a middle class type of an employment, and let's say a machinist. I used to own a machine shop, and our most junior machinist, the person who couldn't even spell or say machine, was making $16 or $17 an hour. So you're an 18-year-old kid making $16 or $17 an hour. Okay, that's not great, but pretty good, not bad. Yeah. And then if you keep on learning, and eventually at the high end, you're programming a machine or you're leading a bunch of machinists, you're making $30, $35 an hour. With overtime, now you're at $100,000 a year, maybe. Not bad. I mean, not bad. That you can raise a family, you can afford a home, you can maybe have some vacations that are decent or whatever. And so we've got to repopulate that portion of us. And so I'm sort of on this tirade against the spreadsheet guild because of that. And that's what got me thinking about, well, what is wealth? Our national conversation should be, can we build or rebuild a society like that and still be trained killer capitalists? I don't think we have to choose.
No.
But we can't have a massive swath of our population that doesn't feel like it can participate in the economic game. Otherwise, they will flip the game board.
Oh, I like an analogy of flipping the game board because it's so true, and we see it happen, and that really is what put the current administration into place. A lot of people that said, "No, I'm tired of this.
Yeah,
I don't want to be." They may not have understood all the consequences and sort of maybe the chaos that we're having, but they did not feel like they were part of our society. That we feel part of.
They exercise this American American trait of saying "fuck off" to authority.
Yeah.
That's what they did, and they will do it again.
Yeah.
You know, if the current version is not rebuilding America in the way that's healthy in these my 5 ways.
Yeah.
And I think I'm pulling for any administration to be successful. Everybody should. We should be pulling. We should be hoping for success, whatever that success is. In my tiny world, can we create an environment to build these amazing companies that make amazing products for people? It's good, honorable work. It can be work done by anyone, even went to high school or a 2-year degree or whatever the case might be. I like to think about it as a positive opportunity. It's a generational opportunity. I want to be able to look back when I'm, hopefully 90 years old and say, okay, I was part of rebuilding this wealth of America. And I know there's tens of thousands of people like me. They're doing much bigger things than I am. And so this is our opportunity. And, going back to Houston has a shot at becoming sort of the epicenter of global manufacturing. Again, we have been, and, I would say that no one in the world knows how to make complex stuff, put it on a flatbed and ship it all over the planet like Houstonians. Yeah. No one. Yeah. We've done it. And so we have all this latent talent and capital and et cetera. Like, for example, the battery stuff that we're making, the skill set to make battery systems is very similar to someone who's making control panels for the oil and gas industry. So I can go to someone who's made that, and with some fairly easy instructions, they can do this. It's wiring, it's bending steel, it's testing, it's electrical connectivity, et cetera. So Houston has this golden opportunity. I mean, I could go get crazy about how Houston can win here, but we have to win.
Well, because one of the things that Houston, we often hold out that we're an energy capital, we're a health capital, we're a space. I said, manufacturing is really the cross-cutting part of the Houston ecosystem. And people tend to forget that a lot of our chemical plants are manufacturing.
Yeah, that's right. They are manufacturing.
It is manufacturing, and that's an important part.
Yeah.
If you think about what we want to do in healthcare and pharma and whatnot, we have real talent in that space that could be put at work to that one.
Yeah, and it's a great point, Jan. So my very first job was as a baby engineer in a chemical plant, and allegedly to fix things that were broken, although I probably broke more things than I fixed in reality. A few spectacular cases of doing that. But it's very interesting because a chemical plant or refinery is a huge automated manufacturing machine that is managed and run by humans. Yep. But they're not actually doing no human is moving this gallon of chemical from point A to point B, but they're managing the machines that are doing it, monitoring them, fixing them, operating them, et cetera. And, these are the extremely advanced manufacturing operations. And we have tens of thousands of people who've grown up.
Yeah, and we have also the talent that actually designs and builds these things. My wife worked for Technip Energies. Yeah, they actually designed those ethylene plants and the refineries and whatnot. Yep. So we have the full stack of talent, from operators in the plant to people that actually design these globally. So it's kind of interesting.
Preaching to the choir. Yeah. I mean, this is the place. And I do think that we have to. You still need sort of this. Knowledge thing or training thing to port them over to like the stuff that we do. It's mostly intuitive for them, but not completely. And this is where, we should talk about AI as it relates to manufacturing. This is where things like AI can really be helpful. We're deploying it natively in our company. It is literally part of my everyday work. It's like I have what I would call a 2-year engineer assistant for $30 a month, because I use Grok. I've tried Perplexity, ChatGPT, and Grok. Grok is great for me and what I'm doing. And so I think these tools now are available to really do special things.
Yeah, before we dive into AI, I want to make a footnote comment. I was, back in 2020, I had the opportunity to visit one of our community colleges. Great idea. It's the first time I went into a conference room, and on the whiteboard was, we admit people that make this much an hour, and in 6 months, you're ready for jobs that make more than 2x that an hour. And when the conversation in the education system is about that, how you truly can transform somebody's income and family, then that's the conversation we're missing to some degree in our education.
I know you're right. We don't have it enough.
Yeah, exactly. So we need more of that.
Yeah, sometimes some of it, we have a marketing problem in manufacturing also. You know, we do, and it's honestly, it's part of the culture. Part of the culture of like legit manufacturing people. Just get shit done, you know, don't beat your chest, etc. And I'm not saying we should beat our chest, but we should tell more stories about what we're doing, because I think otherwise it's a bit of a mystery. You know, it's not like you're going to easily understand it. We don't have any like Netflix TV shows about manufacturing.
Well, maybe we should.
Maybe we should. Yeah, you know, maybe we should.
Well, that was one of my pet peeves when I was running ION, was the fact that we didn't tell enough stories about the successes we have and people that are working hard to create something new here in Houston. What goes on here? You know, because we're such a corporate, sort of inside the corporate walls kind of place. Yeah. And we need to get out there and tell the stories. So
I mean, I'm on LinkedIn as a lot, and you are too, Nada, the big companies are very timid on telling their stories in a social way. Still very kind of corporate-y and blah, blah, blah. I mean, you're right. And I also think this is kind of a Houston culture too. We're more of a
get it done
quietly, don't brag. I was telling a friend of mine who lives in another city, they're in California, about this the other day, that we don't have like this concept of celebrity in Houston like we do in many other places. I mean, you could be at a restaurant with a billionaire and you've never seen that person before in your life. You don't know. And then also Houston is this, 3 or 4 generations, we've become a globally prominent city. You know, but very quietly, we've done it. But so maybe there could be more. Maybe there could be storytelling in a different way. And again, great opportunity for someone out there, you know, to tell stories about Houston, vibrant stories, everything from someone who's making handmade boots or clothes to, you know, the CEO of a Fortune 500 manufacturing company. There's like 1 billion stories to tell.
Yeah.
And, you know, often we don't think about Houston as an entrepreneurial city, but look at the amount of like manufacturing businesses that people have formed here, you know, related to control systems, anything to do with IT and energy. They're all small businesses that are, you know, they're entrepreneurs, but we don't think them in the traditional sense the way, you know, Bay Area is known for like their innovations, because they're, you know, disruptive. While what we're doing is really disrupting quietly in the energy industry to be able to, you know, drill oil at, you know, really deep and rough seas.
I think you're right. You know, I think there's, I would also say that thanks to the work like that people like you do and ION has done, we are much different versus 5 or 6 years ago. I would say that, you know, but it's a slow build like anything else. And I wish, like I said, there were more storytellers around here. I think there are storytellers. Maybe I'm overstating that, but I think there are. There should be more. I think.
No, it's absolutely not enough.
But I think more than just storytelling, there's about going to these areas like Ohio, where you've had a loss of manufacturing jobs, right? Where you have all these people who are unhappy, like going there and creating these centers and training them and like educating them about potential careers. Right? Because these people just don't have the guidance. And, you know, the government should, I mean, other than just the tariffs and the IRA and everything, is like, how much are you creating these centers and having grants to actually have these training centers and
Probably
let people know.
Enough.
Like, I mean, yesterday I was at my son's school, 3rd grade, it was career day. And I was talking about my career, and, you know, there were people talking about being an internal auditor or an engineer, and like, and I'm like, I didn't have this when I was young.
Oh, can you imagine that career day presentation to become an internal auditor?
Yeah, exactly. I know, but like, she had a whole poster.
The kids probably love that.
She was way more prepared than I was. She had this like poster, and I was, you know, just talking about, you know, talking about my stuff. But you know, it was really inspiring to see that they're doing that in these schools, because, you know, in 3rd grade, all I knew was like, okay, maybe you could be a doctor, or like you could be
that's interesting. When I was in I think 5th grade, I got to spend 1 week with my dad at his job.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up on a farm, so I knew how to do farm and mechanical. But he also was working in industry. So, so I spent a whole week, just shadowing him. And you learn a lot about that.
You do.
So,
And I mean,
and you may learn that that's not the job I want to have. I'm going to stay in school. Or you learn like, wow, this is actually something I could do.
And I mean, it's easy when your parents have those jobs, right?
Yes.
But when your parents don't, and you're like that first generation, or like you've skipped some generations of people having real jobs.
Yeah.
Well, then it gets hard.
Then it gets hard, and that's why then schools are important in like giving that exposure, because everyone is supposed to be going to school.
Yeah.
And start early, start at elementary.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I mean, this circles back to your very good question, Jan, about talent. I think it's a multifaceted problem, and so it's going to require different kinds of solutions along the way. But I think we will. I do think we will. We've got a massive shock to our system at this point in time, but and I think that there will be tremendous opportunities along the way to solve this. I can tell you, if I wasn't doing what I am doing now, I'd be 100% focused on this talent thing.
Yeah.
Let me know when you
absolutely.
start.
Yeah.
I'll be there with you.
Look, I will do it with somebody. I just can't have another full-time job. But I think that if
Jan's available.
Yeah, perfect, Jan. Let's do it together. I mean, I think there's ways to really tackle this that, and I think there's enough people in the Houston community to know solutions.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that are working on this too.
Yeah. Well, we've been sort of saying that we're going to get to the AI and how you think about AI. So let's dive into Alchemy and how you're using AI and what AI is going to be doing for your business and for manufacturing more broadly.
Yeah, for sure. So I think one sort of central point I'd like to make is for any company leader today, you should be personally involved in AI and putting it into your workflow. And it's okay if you start with asking ChatGPT for a chocolate chip cookie recipe. If that's where you begin there. But for God's sake, begin. The reason why I think that's important is that if you don't have AI literacy as a leader, you're going to get beaten by somebody that does. And so it's a risk if you don't have it. And so I want to make that kind of editorial point. So I began with the chocolate chip cookie recipe also. And like any tool, the more you use it, the more you realize, oh my goodness, I could do this, I could do that. Oh, it doesn't work well with this. So don't do that anymore. It's not ready. So where it's evolved in and how it's evolving with Alchemy is that it's really looking at certain things that we do over and over again that we can accelerate and do much better. So for example, we were working with a potential customer, knock on wood, we'll get them next week, a PO, fingers crossed, toes crossed, whatever. But so this would be a scalable battery opportunity. So very valuable for us. And so, so we went from doing an initial discovery call with the customer to delivering a proposal in like 25 minutes. Okay, now that was not the first time we tried a proposal. The first time we tried a proposal was awful on it. But so we got some practice in. We'd fed Grok with a lot of data about costs and a bunch of other things, prior proposals. But within 25 minutes, we delivered that proposal. Already formatted, ready to go. So, I mean, how would you think that customer responded? Like, oh my goodness, how is it that you already delivered this proposal to us? And it's like, it's just what we wanted. And it is.
We were waiting for that.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that set us on a path with that customer to what I think will be a win for us next week. So the initial call with that customer was maybe a month ago. And so now we're talking about, a scaled opportunity for an industrial product. So that's pretty quick. So things that I think you can look for opportunities to do things quicker and more accurately. Those are the areas. The other thing that we're doing, and we're just building this now, is that over time we're building up a repository of information that's behind our firewall of all the stuff that we're learning about batteries, everything from UL standards to industry requirements to just stuff we've learned. Even an article that I found or whatever, or a customer call that we've had. So now we've got this building unstructured repository of data that Grok now can learn from. And so now it's you can see it evolving, and this is sort of scary in a way. You can see it evolving from just a ridiculously advanced search feature to now reasoning. And so this is hyper geeky. So last night I couldn't sleep, and because I was thinking about first principles on what a battery is. Okay, way too geeky to admit publicly, but I was doing it like at midnight. Literally, I'm thinking about this, and so I turned on my phone and was having a conversation with Grok about let's talk about first principles on a battery. And so over the half an hour, I had this conversation with Grok, and we arrived at this description of a battery, which is a device that has potential energy that's reversible, that when triggers does work. Mm-hmm. So Grok and I came to this conclusion together. And so Grok was beginning to reason with me. And I loved it because I was interacting with it orally, not, through the difficulty of typing or thumbing. So now I think I think those are the areas, and we're doing a few other things in the company that are allowing us to first get more accurate and faster, but now emerging with reasoning capabilities. One other example I'll give you is about a week ago, I got curious about this, and I said, Grok, design a battery energy storage system for me, but you can't use any readily available commercial components. How would you do it? And it gave me an output. Probably 80% of it was complete bullshit, but 20% of it was, holy shit, this is really interesting. Like, how did it come up with this idea, this concept? And so I think, and you can only do this, I think, as a leader, as I said, by actually using it. I think there's a lot of other hardcore business cases that you can use in there, but I think the real value is a real integration with how you do work. And I think that's going to be different for different people. I think there's a ton of great use cases in manufacturing at the shop floor, especially when you integrate things like machine vision. So for example, let's say, I'm again making this, and the label on this bottle needs to be positioned, 3.5 inches from the top. So very simple machine vision use case, easy to do. And so you can now disrupt quality assurance. You can do it quicker, more accurate. And then let's say that I'm using machine vision. I realize that 3% of my bottles is a little bit off. Now I can go back to the manufacturing process and figure out what happened. So those use cases are not things that I came up with. Those are, ready to implement use cases. And this sort of circles back to, I think, a couple of important things. One is when you look at a product, the labor input costs for that product are somewhere between 40% and 10% of the total cost. 40% for a hoodie or this t-shirt, very labor intensive. For a semiconductor, 10% or even less because it's more automated. So AI can allow you to start driving out some of the labor input costs, which is a little counterintuitive when it relates to jobs, but only in the short run. What it really does, it allows you also to think about different product opportunities. So I would argue, and I was having this conversation with a friend of mine the other day, like this great public debate about iPhones and can't make iPhones in America. Okay, maybe not. I don't know, but I've never made an iPhone. I just know how to use it, And so, but to me, the fundamental question is, what is the right product that should exist? And can you make that? And can you leverage these technology to make a better product than an iPhone? So in my mind, reshoring, the first use case is stuff that was made here, make it here exactly the same, okay? The broader use case is, what can we really make? What is possible? This is what got me to thinking about wealth in these 5 ways. Is we should be building things within each one of those 5 areas, in my view. And so AI, I think, enables that initial use case for the spreadsheet guild loves, taking costs out. But the real enabler is just like that weird conversation I had at 12:30 at night. Which is what's the first principles of battery. And the reason I was wondering that, which was what is really the right thing to build? Like, what does a battery really do? That's what we should be thinking about. And So
I like that. Yeah, what should we actually be making? And I know, Jan, you have a lot more questions.
But
and so do I, but
Yeah,
we're running out of time
We're
here.
running out of time. That's interesting because
Yeah.
it's like, there's a couple of interesting things here. And I actually do want you to kind of respond very quickly.
Yeah.
I love the way you talked about how you started using it. It's a conversational tool. AI, you start there because, don't get discouraged by getting a bad sort of like, well, that's not right. No, keep probing the AI tool, and then you and somebody told me the other day, it's like, and then I asked them to build an app for me that simulated my physical system. So they got an app, so they can now use it there. But people are probably paranoid about, am I giving away my IP? How do you think about that? And then I'm going to stop asking questions.
That's a very good question, and so this is why we're doing things behind our firewall. So there's IP, but there's also I've signed non-disclosure agreements. And so I'm going to be very careful about how that leaks out of our organization in general. And so, I think, and most large language models allow you to have APIs now where, your data set is not existing outside of your firewall. So I do think there's some like good IT hygiene and housekeeping that people should be thinking about. I'm actually working on a AI roadmap for manufacturers document now, which is really just to say, hey, this is what I've done. Maybe it's 70% right, but at least you get the 70%, based on what I've learned, and you help me fill in the rest of it. So I think that's sort of one of the issues on IP.
Yeah.
And really quick, I don't know if you can give me like a one sentence
Sure.
on this, but like, over the past 10 years, we've been also a lot more before than now talking about additive manufacturing, but we don't talk about that so much anymore. It's AI now.
It's still a thing. It was a bit of a metaverse thing for a while, more hype than reality, but there is reality. Interestingly enough, I think one of the limits of additive manufacturing is material science. So I think the thing to pay attention to is the more material science advances, the more additive manufacturing use cases will come back. It's still used actively, but I think it's the boundaries on material science.
Yeah, and it's maybe a longer time frame than
I think
like
so.
happening.
Because you also have to,
today.
I'll add the second sentence, you also have to rethink design thinking completely.
Right.
You have to design for additive. It's not replacement, for whatever it is you're making.
Awesome. This was great. We're going to have to bring you on again in
it.
6 months and see like how things have changed.
Let's
and,
do it.
Where we are. Yeah.
And look, I'd love to have you guys out and show you what we're building.
We'd
like
love
show
that.
and tell. And
let's do that.
It's
Where's your
we're on the
factory?
east end of downtown.
East
We're
end,
like 5 minutes
let's
from
do
the
that.
original Memphis.
We take our members out for a field trip every quarter.
We would love to host.
Let's plan that.
We're kind of a garage band out there, so it's not fancy, but we are building real things. And if anyone wants to see like what's actually inside one of these battery systems, we'll show it to you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Can't touch it, but we'll show it to you.
Okay.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you both of
Thanks
you.
for having
Appreciate
me.
it.
I appreciate it.
My takeaway from this one is that let's not work too hard on unnecessary reshoring. That's reshoring the capability and build the next product here and scale from there.
Yeah. That's the opportunity.
Yeah.
That's the opportunity.